Today on the show, we discuss the tragic story of the Elixni, a society blessed by the traveler, only to fall to darkness. Welcome to Lore Party, the podcast that explores the stories, characters, and universes of our favorite video games. I'm Connor.
And I'm Kevin.
And we're back at it for another Destiny episode to talk about some of the coolest enemies and the first ones you actually fight in the games, the Fallen, or as they like to be called, the Elixni.
Yeah, man. I like that they gave us like a real name for them.
That's always fun.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like the Hive, like, that's whatever, but like the Fallen, I was like, oh, that's a kind of cool name, but then finding out that no, that's not what they call themselves. It's like, wait, what?
It was kind of like finding out that the elites in Halo don't call themselves that. They're called the Sangheili.
I mean, essentially, that's
stuff like that.
That's really what they remind me of too, is like the elites in Halo.
Yeah, and that's a Bungie thing. Bungie likes the alien races with monikers, but real names they refer to themselves as.
I think that plays really well into like a war mindset where, like, at least like in humanity, like when we go to war, we look at like the enemy and we make nicknames for them to dehumanize them. And so like, it's kind of the same thing. Like we see this other species and it's like, we don't want you to realize that they also, have lives and a planet and like this and that of society. So we like make these names to just, I don't want to say dehumanize because they're not human, but
they're already not
something
human.
like that to make it very much more us versus them.
Yeah, it's easier to fight an enemy when you don't think about where they come from and what makes them unique. And especially in the Fallen's case, when you hear the Fallen and you see them and you kind of look at how they behave, you start to wonder, well, if they are the Fallen, what did they fall from? That kind of implies that they haven't always been the way they are, which is what we're here to explore today.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped because I think that this giant chunk of lore is I honestly think that the fact that we learn so much about them and their society and stuff in game now is hopefully a teaser for some stuff we'll talk about later that I'm trying not to get in theories here, but like woo, man, this stuff's gonna be good. We're gonna have fun here.
Absolutely. I think understanding the Elixni and how they came to be what they are today, the Fallen, it opens the door for understanding so much other stuff about the Destiny universe.
What are they? Let's go, Connor. Let's do this. What's their history? Who are they? Give me everything. I got a notebook. Let's go.
If you've played Destiny, you're very familiar with them. They are very common. They're a common enemy faction you fight all the time. In fact, as I mentioned, they are the first enemy that players encountered way back in vanilla Destiny. And when you start up a new character in Destiny today, the Fallen are the first enemies you face. And they have an iconic presentation. They're like these kind of underhanded, scoundrelly, space pirate type enemies that, they're kind of like cyborgs. They have like robotic arms and stealth technology and laser guns. And they seem like this really crazy sci-fi, alien threat. It's like a classic alien enemy faction, but there's way more to them than the first glance might tell you. Like, they might seem like just opportunistic scavengers, but there's more to them than that. What like the name The Fallen sort of implies, they used to be a lot more than that.
It's so funny you're saying there's like more to them, and like I keep thinking, I'm like, Transformers more than me. See, like they just there is like though like they've transformed into a completely different like species. So we're going to go into like, their history and stuff and like where they come from. But then we're going to kind of talk a little bit more also about like what they are now and how that's kind of affecting everything more than meets the eye. Haha. So yeah, I mean like Elixni society, like it's deeper. Definitely.
It is pretty cool. Yeah. Like they aren't just random gangs of pirates. They aren't just like ramshackled groups of Fallen sort of hanging out together. There's actually a structure. Elixni society is organized into what they call houses, which is kind of like clans or nation states or like big crews that work together. And underneath this guerrilla war, piracy and scavenging, the houses of the fallen cling to a very long history, and they all together bear a collective pain and a desire for survival, a desire to regain what they once had. And that's kind of what helps them cling together. What keeps the houses of the fallen sort of working in a common purpose is this shared history. And leading these fallen houses are what they call a kell, Kell. A kell is kind of like, just the chieftain or the big boss in charge of each house. And the kells are supported by what are called archons, which are kind of like priests or spiritual leaders. And then, of course, you have captains who are kind of like crew leaders, and you fight captains on the field all the time. Now, the houses, have a surprising degree of cooperation with themselves. Like, houses work together pretty well, but or at least among themselves. But houses don't always get along with other houses. Like, I mentioned this shared history, but that doesn't always keep them together.
Well, each house has its own, I guess you could say, culture and goal. Like, each one is its own little mini society. Like, I think like Greece with its little like city states, and how like Athens and Sparta are like they're both Greek. They are completely different in almost every aspect, aside from just like being part of a collective. And so like they don't always agree, and you'll have like infighting. Like, a lot of houses, they'll fight each other, and then it like kind of creates opportunities, not like alliance opportunities, which is awesome for us as Guardians, but also it creates a lot of weak opportunities for them just overall, because they're not coordinated enough, like as a species. So like there's always kells that are trying to become the kell of kells and like everybody, like the one in charge, but ultimately like it doesn't work out. There's always some kind of issue. But it makes for some really great strikes, right?
Sure. Yeah, some really fun missions.
But yeah, so like I mean, that's kind of the Fallen, like in a nutshell, like the basics. But what they were before all of this is completely different than how they kind of are now.
Yeah.
And I think it's really funny. I think it's almost poetic that they were like the first enemy that we encounter, because they're like kind of like that trope of those that came before.
Yeah.
So basically, they were the chosen ones of the Traveler before us. So it's like we're fighting almost like we're the next generation, if you will, and we're fighting these guys that you're not it anymore. Yeah,
it's interesting, like that dynamic of humankind being set upon and preyed upon by their predecessors, those that came before, and we mentioned earlier this. Desire of the Fallen to reclaim this former glory that they once had. And that former glory came from the Traveler, like you mentioned, Kevin. Like, mankind is not the first species the Traveler assisted and uplifted, quote unquote. Because centuries before arriving in the solar system, the Traveler visited the home system of the Elixni. And similarly to how Destiny started for humanity, the Traveler gifted the Elixni a similar boon of technology and societal advancement, kind of uplifting them into a golden age similar to mankind's golden age. So what we once had, the Elixni once had too. And during their golden age, it could be argued that the Elixni achieved an even greater level of expansion than humans did. Like, during our golden age, mankind in the Destiny setting, we colonized our entire solar system. Like, life on Earth like quintupled in quality, and then we started living on the moon and Mars and Venus, and things that were never thought possible before the Traveler came along were suddenly possible. The Elixni did even more than that. The Elixni reached other star systems. We didn't manage to pull that off before our collapse.
I think there was like ships that we sent out or something like that, but like
there were attempts.
It was never. There was always like a barrier for us, like
relativity,
whether it be the
distance.
hive or some other species or something like that.
Right. So like we attempted that. There were attempts to colonize other star systems outside of Earth, but the Elixni actually pulled that off in like successfully expanded to other systems. So
they did it like, I'm talking, I mean, you want to talk about overachievers.
Mhm.
They really did it.
Right. Yeah, they went for it, and they made the most out of their golden age. But unfortunately, just like our golden age, the Elixir's golden age was not meant to last. There was this kind of unspecified and not fully understood event called the Whirlwind. The theory goes that the darkness attacked the Elixir home system kind of the same way it attacked the solar system, with these, pyramids and tendrils of darkness just collapsing. I think I remember reading that the Elixir home world itself, the home planet, was just completely destroyed. And unfortunately, this is also when the Traveler leaves the Elixir behind. It kind of just books it, gets out of Dodge, and leaves them by them.
Yeet!
Kind of, yeah, you see ya, and sort of leaves them to their own devices. And so the Elixir completely collapse into civil war and, an age of darkness. But they clawed their way back. They eventually kind of reunited their species, and they got a interstellar fleet together, basically, to go off on a grand sojourn across the stars, across the void. And they all kind of coalesced around this singular purpose of, we're going to go find the Traveler, follow it, find where it went, reclaim it, and take back what's ours, basically. That was their entire purpose, and that journey brought them to Earth.
See, I think that there's such a big difference between how humanity and the Elixir reacted to the Traveler. Because like we get to see like the Traveler show up on Mars, and we get to see all that stuff like in like that first cutscene from Destiny 1. And then we kind of hear a lot from the speaker and just like a lot of other stuff that we can read and talk about with like our Golden Age and stuff. Because for humanity, a lot of people, just like Clovis, they understood that the Traveler was a machine. It was created by another being or another species, and it's a technology that is far, far beyond our comprehension or understanding. And we have just scratched the surface. And they realized that it's, something created it, and there's something about it, and we got to figure it out. And there were humans that worshipped the Traveler, kind of like a deity, but the Fallen worship this thing like it was. I mean, they're like, this is God. They view the Traveler as like an all-encompassing higher power, and it was this like when the Traveler abandoned them, it wasn't just like that crazy advanced machine that showed up disappeared. Like to them,
that's
like,
a bummer.
My God, I still think people would freak out on Earth, but like. It was just all that more impactful. Like their deity that they worshipped so much that gave them literally everything. Boop, bye. It just abandoned them.
Yeah, it was an existential crisis for them to an unconscionable degree for us. Like if literally you knew God was there and you saw it, and you could look at it on any given day, and then suddenly it disappeared. Like, what does that do to you as a people?
And like abandoned you, though. It wasn't like it was just like we're being attacked. What do we do? Wait, where is he? It's like there. You know what I mean? Like
it's crazy to think about, and that tells us so much about the Elixir too. It kind of tells us what they've been through as a people and why they are known as the Fallen. That really kind of encapsulates what they're all about. Like their society was once at the peak of civilization. They had achieved so much. The level of enormous setbacks they've suffered, and the downfall they've suffered, and the crumbling of their empire. What you see as the Fallen now, like as big of a threat they are now, they are a fraction, like a shade, a shadow of their former glory.
Oh yeah. They're nothing like they were, and they're still a pain in the ass. But they're nowhere near what they could be.
Yeah, imagine Guardians fighting the Elixir at their peak. Like it would be over in like a day. There'd be nothing.
What Guardians?
You could do. Yeah, what Guardians?
We wouldn't. I don't think. I mean, look, I've taken out hive gods. I've taken out all sorts of crazy shit. But I don't know, man. These guys are pretty powerful.
We've broken Cabal siege tanks, but the Elixir at their peak would show up and make that look like like fire ants, like stepping on bugs. It's nothing.
I honestly think that the Elixni at their prime would just decimate.
Oh, sure.
Decimate, destroy completely the Cabal. Like, no competition. So, okay, well, then I have a question, though. So why do you think that the Traveler fled? Like, why didn't they flee with us, but they fled with them?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Or sorry, the million engram question.
Million glimmer, million ether, million. There's so many currencies I don't know.
So many currencies. There's a million silver, million Vanguard mark question. Sorry. Legendary shard question. Sorry. I got to stop myself. No, that is the big question, because the Traveler's motives are basically unknowable. I can't pretend to even begin to speculate, but like, if I had to, there's something about the way the Traveler behaves, the few things we know about it. We don't know much about it, but what we do know about it implies that maybe when the Elixni were attacked and the Whirlwind happened and their civilization collapsed, it's possible the Traveler just kind of did that, Traveler calculus that it does, that sort of mathematics where it's like, what's the what's the cost benefit ratio of staying and fighting and protecting the Elixni versus would it be better if I got out of here while I could and helped another species, and maybe that next species will be able to fight the darkness. It's possible that the Traveler thought the Elixni, as powerful as they are right now, are not ready to face the darkness, and even if I help them, they're doomed. So maybe it's best if I move on and try to help someone else. That could have been it. I don't know, though.
See, man, that messes me up, because then I think, like, if they were so powerful, and like we said, we just said how powerful they were. They were, like, crazy powerful. If they weren't ready, what the hell makes them, like, how are we ready?
Yeah.
Because then I think, like, do you think it's the first time that happened? Like, do you think, I personally don't think it's the first time this happened, because
me neither.
I think the Traveler's been on the run for a while.
Billions of years, maybe, yes.
Yeah, I think this whole thing, we will get into that in probably maybe another episode.
Hope so, yeah.
But I don't think this is the first time. And I also think that maybe the reaction, now I don't know too much about, the Whirlwind. Like, we don't know a lot about it, but like, maybe it was like how they reacted to the darkness.
Yeah, could have been.
Maybe it was how, like, for instance, like, we don't rely on the Traveler. Like, we love all of the light and all that stuff. Like, we love all that stuff. But, like, we lost our light. And we still kicked ass. Like, we were still going at it. Like, we were like, all right, cool. We don't have that. Whatever, make do. And I think that maybe the Traveler knew in its Traveler calculus that it knew, like, okay, there's something different about this species, like the drive. They don't need me to fight they'll fight the darkness without me, no
They're
matter
self-sufficient
what.
enough,
and that's and that's what they don't need me, and I'm just here to help.
That could be it. Yeah, that's definitely something to think about. But that does bring us to sort of, you mentioned, the Traveler, after the fall of the Elixni, the Traveler does find its way to Earth, and that's when humanity's golden age happens. Unfortunately, history repeats itself, as we know. The darkness wipes out the Elixni, turns them into the Fallen, and then it eventually comes to Earth too. So that brings us basically to the modern timeline, the age of the city, the age of the Guardians. Humanity's still clinging to life. The Traveler is kind of broken in a shadow of itself. The Traveler is kind of damaged and sort of slumbering on Earth. And the Fallen show up and they see the Traveler. They find what they've been searching for probably hundreds, maybe thousands of years. They find it on Earth, and they find it just hovering over the last city of mankind and kind of protecting people after their collapse. Naturally, this stokes intense feelings of envy, resentment, and greed amongst the Fallen. They are once proud people, and they find their prize, basically, because they see the Traveler as like a possession. Well, a god/possession.
It wasn't a good breakup. That's all. Like, really, it was not a good.
They're a little
breakup.
Possessive. Yeah.
There's a lot of
They're stalking,
feelings still going around.
they're stalking their ex all the way to Earth and not happy with its new
it's not good
relationship. Yeah,
it's not good.
And when they see this, as far as the Fallen are concerned, when they see this, the Traveler didn't just abandon them. They start to think that the Traveler was stolen from them by humanity. And so the collapse, the Whirlwind, the journey across interstellar space, all of that really changed the Elixni. Like, I don't think anyone can go through that kind of thing without changing. And so enduring the collapse of their own advanced society, surviving that voyage, all of that has, at this point, endowed the Fallen with a very strong sense of take what you need to survive. Like, that's kind of their mantra now. Take whatever you need. Keep going. And at this point, it's also very apparent that they are now completely reliant on technology to survive. You can see this in just kind of like their animation models, their character models, and just the way they appear in the game. They are fed this substance called ether by floating spherical robots called servitors. Interestingly, servitors bear a very striking resemblance to the Traveler. So,
oh, geez, man, I don't know. You're dating somebody who looks like your ex, dude. Like, the more we talk about this, the more I'm realizing,
move on,
dude. It's really like it is a toxic relationship, man. This is wow.
Yeah, to them, the Traveler isn't just a shiny, valuable prize to be stolen. It's their wayward god, and it's a link to their vaunted past that they want to reclaim. So they're obsessed with reclaiming their past, and that's kind of what leads them to make war on mankind to reclaim the Traveler.
I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to bring this up throughout the whole episode. This is such a toxic relationship.
It really
is like the more you talk about it, like if this was like a relationship with two people, like you'd be like, whoa, what the hell?
Yeah,
like, come on,
cringe.
man, move on. Like,
you're posting cringe.
Like, man. The Fallen, well, here's the thing. The Fallen have a mentality that they can't rebuild their society on their own. Like, they can't do it on their own. And I'm sitting here like, guys, come on. Like, you found the Traveler on your own.
Yeah.
You're still surviving on your own. Look at everything you've done on your own to survive. I think they're a lot stronger than they think.
Yeah, they don't give themselves enough credit. They don't believe in themselves.
But see, that they have such a large sense of pride, like, in themselves. But generalizing, like, their overall view, like, they don't believe they can continue as a society without the Traveler.
Mm-hmm.
Their quote-unquote world revolved around it. And, I mean, as is humanities, like, humanities does too.
Yeah.
But, again, we've shown that we're happy by ourselves. We can be happy without that.
Yeah, we are complete people,
right? Yeah. So wow.
Yeah, it's rough.
All right, guys, we're gonna go hand in some engrams. We'll be right back.
We interrupt this podcast with a message from a different podcast. Hello, my name is Lawrence, a producer and host here on Lore Party, and I'm here to talk to you about our Last of Us 2 series. With humanity's last chance at a cure now seemingly gone, the world continues down its dark path. But nevertheless, life moves on. A now adult Ellie must confront the ghost of Joel's past, all while dodging religious cults, militant revolutionaries, and her own inner demons. Tune in to our Last of Us series as my co-host Leo and I discuss the ultimate moral questions the game posits, the characters caught in this conflict, and a-ha's hit single, Take On Me. Just hop on over to our Lore Party feed and search The Last of Us 2. Well, that's enough from me. Back to your show.
So, we understand the Fallen's history at this point. What brought them to this point, how they became the Fallen, and it's important to understand this unending series of conflicts the Fallen have kind of endured. Like, throughout their history, they've dealt with multiple species-wide civil wars. Kevin, you mentioned how houses kind of turn on each other. Kells wanting to wipe out rival Kells. Like, that's something they have in common with humanity, as it so happens. Like, humans don't get along all the time either. So that's a big part of their history. But On the other hand, the Elixni kind of share this common sense of tenacity that, even though they fight each other on occasion, they still, as a whole, constantly seek out new ways to survive despite losing the gifts of the quote-unquote great machine, as they call the Traveler. So, like you mentioned, Kevin, like they think they can't survive without the Traveler, but they do pretty much just fine on their own. They have that survival instinct, that tenacity to keep going no matter what.
Hell, they made their own exos.
That's true, yeah.
Like
they're pretty resourceful.
Oh yeah.
And it's easy to assume that, I guess for me personally, when I was first playing through Vanilla Destiny years ago, I just assumed, they're just scrapping whatever they think might be valuable. But in fact, there's a deeper kind of motivation there, because losing the Traveler taught them to use whatever is at hand in order to survive. And that's part of their history, but it's also part of their current outlook on life, really. That's still part of their general philosophy as a species.
And it's funny because that reminds me of like what we say about humanity. Like there's always like, your survival instinct, like if you're trapped in the woods or something, you'll do whatever it takes to survive. Like, but there's a lot of different ways too that we get to see how they've adapted and tried to survive. And it's vastly different. Like some adapted like way beyond the old ways. Like we have Varix, for instance. Varix is like the main Elixni that we interact with. We've been interacting with him since late Destiny 1. So like Varix and other Fallen, they've come to view humanity like as an ally. They see the Traveler accepting others, and to them they're like, okay, well, if you accept humanity, then we should too. And I think that's probably the best mentality we got out there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that they don't have like, reservations or anything like that. Like, sure, I have reservations about humanity myself. Like, let's be real here. But some have betrayed humanity and stuff, and some stuff has happened, and they have, if you will, quote unquote, they have fallen, into their old mindset. Like for instance, Varix with the Prison of Elders riot. Like that's a thing. Yeah. That's a thing.
And I like that you mentioned, we've kind of touched on these parallels, like you've mentioned, between the Fallen and humans. Like there are so many instances of the Fallen behaving in ways that are pretty relatable to how people have behaved over time. Like, if you look at their golden age and our golden age, their collapse, our collapse, their struggle to survive, mankind's struggle to survive, you start to think that their story easily could have been ours too, if mankind's golden age had ended differently. Like, think about if when the darkness came after the solar system and the Earth, and, when all that was going down, what if the Traveler had abandoned us during our collapse too? You could easily see how mankind very well could have gone down a similar road as the Fallen. Instead of Guardians, we could have had this quasi-militaristic society of light bearers or techno pirates who sort of roam the ruins of the solar system and maybe follow the Traveler and try to steal it from some other race. We could have been them. And I think the point of our analysis here today, this episode, is just, at the end of the day, when you look at it, humanity and the Elixni very well could have more commonalities than differences. Like, maybe we're not so different after all. I know that's so cliche and trite. Like, we're not so different after all. But, like, really, there's so many parallels there. Like, what happened to them could have happened to us.
So I have a lot of questions now, because more of like discussion questions, because I have my own thoughts that we can go over too. But like, do you think that humanity now accepting the darkness? Spoiler alert. We're using stasis, guys. Super broken in Crucible as of right now, but whatever.
Go play Beyond Light.
Do you think, God, dude, oh man. Do you think humanity, like accepting the darkness and kind of harnessing that power, do you think that it could lead to a similar fate in this timeline that it did in like Elizabeth's timeline? Because Elizabeth's timeline, we did embrace the darkness, but then it took over us, and then like we basically got corrupted, and like the Fallen were like, like what's gonna, like I'm curious to see what happens with them in another timeline. But I'm just curious, like maybe the Traveler could have second thoughts about us and say, whoa, wait guys, I thought now you dating two of us? Like, wait a minute. Like, are you cheating on me? Like, I don't know. That's how I'm feeling. Like, do you think that the Traveler is starting to have second thoughts?
Yeah.
That we're embracing its enemy to fight its enemy? I mean.
Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know. It's like, oh man, the Traveler turning around looking at humans with stasis, and they're like, oh man, I thought I could trust you guys. What's wrong with you? Yeah, it's like, that's possible. But I think we have to come back to our other hypothetical earlier, like, why do we think the Traveler abandoned the Fallen? I think it could come back to that. Like, maybe, again, this Traveler calculus happening behind the scenes, maybe the Traveler thinks the Elixni couldn't be trusted with stasis powers or just anything coming from the darkness, but maybe the Traveler thinks that humans are trustworthy. Maybe if the Traveler saw the Fallen wielding stasis, they think, the Traveler thinks, oh, well, that's going to go bad. Like, there's no good that can come of that. But maybe, at least in our timeline, the current timeline, the Traveler could see humans wielding stasis as a necessary risk. What if, like, I know humans at this point. I'm very familiar with them. I know how they think. I know how they operate. I believe I can trust them with the powers of my enemy because it'll make them more able to fight my enemy. Total speculation. That's possible, but then it's also possible that we repeat history. Like you mentioned, Elizabeth's timeline. What that same series of events could happen again. It could go either way. It's like 50-50 as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Because then I think, like, there's how we handle stuff too, like how we handle that loss. I mean, technically, humanity lost the Traveler, if you will, but it wasn't the same type of loss. Like, there's
it didn't
differences
completely leave.
Yeah, there's differences in the kind of loss, but like the Fallen are still fighting for their Traveler, for the Traveler to be theirs. Like, it's their Traveler, all that. But how do you feel like, the Fallen versus humanity handled losing the Traveler? Like, we fought also. Like, I still think, like, we handled it similarly, and it's like we fought for the Traveler, though, rather than to make the Traveler ours again. Like, I don't think we saw the Traveler as a possession. I think the Cabal saw the Traveler as a possession as well. Yeah. But to them, they didn't even ever experience the Traveler, like, truly. So I don't think that. I think their viewpoint was they saw the Great Machine. They were like, that's us. Let's take it. We want it. We want the power. It's an object. Whereas I think the Elixni are fighting to have the Traveler, whereas we were fighting for the Traveler.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, I think I get you. There's several ways to look at the Traveler. There's, like you mentioned, the Cabal, especially during the Red War, beginning of Destiny 2, Dominus Gaul shows up and he thinks the Traveler is just a possession. It's just a source of power. It's literally just a prize to win. And he proved not worthy of the light because the Traveler is not just a possession. It's a sentient thinking being. And then there's the way that the Fallen looked at it, the Elixni looked at it. It's a god, and it's blessing us with gifts. And if we fight hard enough to wipe out humanity and take the Traveler back, we can regain what we once had. And then there's the third way to look at it, which is kind of how the majority of humans look at the Traveler. Like, it's a hyper advanced machine, but it's still a machine. But it's also an ally. It's like not our god necessarily, but it's helping us, and then we in turn should help it. But I guess the big important difference there is that when our collapse happened, the Traveler didn't leave. It stayed and it fought. Yeah. And again, we can get into speculation. I think we've got into speculation already about why that was, but that does influence the way we look at it, I think.
Well, that's the thing is, like, when we lost our light, if you will, the Traveler was still kind of guiding us to a degree, but we were still kicking butt without it, and we were like, no, we're gonna fight with you rather than you're gonna be ours.
Yeah, so not to possess you, but to help you. Yeah,
because many Fallen, like, they'll do whatever it takes to survive, as we've talked about. So some will create alliances, other will embrace the darkness, some will completely change their physical being. But the Fallen, they go to such lengths to utilize, even texts of, like, other civilizations. What do you think is the best way for them to survive? And also, do you think any of these things are, like, in desperation?
I think in a lot of ways, desperation drives them to do most of what they do. But as far as what is the best way for them to survive, like, I hate to get hokey and philosophical here, but I think in cooperation is the best way for anyone to survive. I think creating a community, I think love triumphing over hate and fear is always what you want. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, you really were going to get cliche on that one.
I'm a Hallmark card over here. But no, I like I said, I do hope to see some bridges being built, because I feel bad for the Fallen. Like, knowing what they've gone through, I do have sympathy for, what led them to where they are. And obviously I identify with the humans too. So like, I want what's best for everyone. And I believe that what's best for everyone is uniting against the darkness, and hopefully they start to see that. What do you think though? Like, is that viable? Do you think that would work?
Yeah. I mean, because also it leads to another question where it's like, do you think regaining the Traveler is still like on the plate there as their main goal, or like has it now changed? Because now the way that some of them are acting, like embracing the darkness, they're like, I don't need you anymore. Like, I feel like a lot of them are like, they're floundering, if you will. Like, they're just all over the place. Like, they're almost less united and more polarized in terms of clans than before. And so far, I think every single faction that's united with humanity has done really well. They know they can count on us if as an ally. Like, they understand, like, hey, I have this thing, I need some help. We're there. Like, they realize that. God, it would be so cool to see like the Elixni just like walk into the last city, but like as like our ally. I think that would be cool.
I love that.
I think if we can have a symbiotic relationship almost with the Traveler, I think they could also have a really good relationship with us. And they've shown that. And every single time they've shown that, they've done really well. So I think that that's probably the best way for them to reach their goals, I guess. But again, their goals some of them have changed now. And a lot of it just seems like the goal of the Elixni now is just to survive.
Yeah, that's a great point. That point about, what brought the Elixni to the solar system in the first place was wanting to regain possession of the Traveler, but, their motivations have changed. Some Fallen just want to be self-sufficient now, and like Varix, some Fallen want to work with humans to survive. I think over time, more and more Elixni are realizing that cooperation is a viable path to survival. And if survival is what they care about, whether or not that includes the Traveler, I think they'll eventually come to the conclusion that peace and cooperation with mankind is preferable to war. Especially when, the pyramids start showing up, you're going to want friends.
Well, yeah, now we're all surrounded right now.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is, why can't we be friends? Why can't we all just get along?
Well, that about wraps it up. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please take a second to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us grow the show. Be sure to connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at @lore_party. And check out our YouTube page for bonus videos and highlights. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you guys next time.